Hi, this is Winds of the Past, and I am here to show you how to create a single-edged katana style latex foam sword. First, let's go over the materials. Aside from your basic tools such as razor blade and ruler, we'll need duct tape. This is a good old-fashioned duct tape. You can buy it anywhere, self-explanatory. Then we'll need a cloth tape. This is what it looks like. This is used for wrapping hockey handles. You can buy this at any sports store such as Big 5 and Sports Authority. Just make sure it is tape. This is cloth adhesive tape, so just make sure you're buying the right one. Then we'll need a glue. Personally, I use the DAP contact cement in the red can. This is the glue that is recommended by all the foam builders out there. It is way better than the green can. You want to avoid the green can. Make sure you get the one in the red. The reason why is because the green does not dry fast enough, so it will not be useful for what we're doing. Just make sure you're in a good place when you're dapping, because this in the red can tends to smell really bad. So make sure you're in a really good place. Okay, then we have the liquid latex. This is called Mold Builder Liquid Latex. You can purchase this at any craft store. In my case, I bought it at Michael's. This will help you create the design that you want for your weapon, and it looks really cool. Okay, then we'll need about half a yard of fabrics. This is for covering your blade once it's done. We don't have to worry about that right now, but just keep that in mind. We'll also need some rope. This is optional. You can figure out a way how to make a grip your own way, but for this purposes we will be using rope, so for the grip. Okay, then we move on to the cores that we're going to be using. We're going to be using a 1/2 inch fiberglass core that is 40 inches long. We're going to be constructing a katana that is about 42 inches, so we'll want a 40-inch rod. Now there are different kind of cores you can use, fiberglass being one of them. The plus side about using fiberglass is that it's very durable and it's very light. The only problem is it's not cheap and it's not as easy to obtain. An alternative is, of course, PVC pipe, which a lot of people still use. PVC pipe is thicker in this case. The inside is 1/2 inch. It is cheap, it's readily available, and it comes in great quantities, so you can make a lot of weapons. But again, for this demonstration purposes, we'll be sticking with the fiberglass core. Okay, let's move on to the foam that we'll be using. This is the major component of your sword. I use the Walmart camp pad. You can buy this blue camp pad at Walmart. It's about $6 a roll. It comes in great quantities. You can get a lot of mileage out of this. It's not as good as some of the other foams that are out there, but for this purpose, we're going to be using this foam. There's also the REI pad, which is more soft, and with the downside being it's a little bit more expensive. So again, the Walmart foam is what I like to get because it is very cheap for entry-level sword. Finally, we have the open cell foam. The open cell foam is like seat cushions. You can buy any kind of foam that you want as long as it's soft. Stay away from memory foam. The foam that I got in this case is 1/2 inch of open cell foam that I got at fabric stores such as Joann. Okay, so now that we have all the materials ready, let's get ready to make some swords. Okay, now that we're ready to get started, first thing we're going to do is we are going to prepare the rod so that the edge do not poke through the foam once we actually start making the blade. So what we want to do is get the cloth tape from before, and what we want is just a little piece of it, and we want to simply cap it off at the top. This will ensure that the cloth on the rod will not go through the foam. That results in some major problems somewhere down the line. So after you capped it off, you want to have another strip of duct tape, and you want to wrap around it. This will ensure that this portion is not strong enough to push through the foam, and you'll want to do that on the other side. Okay, now that we're ready to get started, let's first prepare your rod. So you have your fiberglass rod. If you have any sandpaper, now will be a good time to sand down the surface a little bit, and that way it will help absorb the glue. So the first thing we gotta do is, after you tape down each of the ends, you have to start figuring out how long of your rod will the blade actually be. If you look to the end here, I set aside about 2 inches where the pommel is. This way, if it hits somebody with the end of the rod, it won't poke out their eyes. So next we want to figure out how long your handle is going to be, depending on how big your hands are. For me, since it's a two-handed sword, it's about 7 to 8 inches. Then we want to leave an inch or so for the cross guard. You don't really need a cross guard, but it looks really cool if you have one. And so really the rest of your blade is only going to be about 31 inches. So now that we've had these divisions drawn out, marked with a Sharpie, it's time to actually construct the blade. Okay, now we're going to start making the sword itself. I have laid out here a portion of my blue foam. You might already start to realize it's actually going to curl up on you, so it might be good to invest in some paperweight. I got some textbooks that are just sitting around, so they're perfect. So the first thing I want to do is you want to create the portion of the blade that we've discussed earlier. I want to put down my blade on the mat so that I could determine how long it needs to be. Now what we want to do is we want to cut out a portion of the blade that is about 3 inches wide. Now it doesn't have to be exactly 3 inches, but you want to make sure that it's as straight as possible. Your workmanship here is going to be very important. It's going to determine how good your blade looks. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to measure 3 inches all the way across. Now the way I do that is, instead of making a mistake, what I do is I will measure 3 inches like so, and with a Sharpie I am going to mark exactly where 3 inches is. Now I'm going to do that all the way down the length of the blade, and now I can basically connect the dot, and I will know that whatever line that I draw here will for sure be a straight line. Okay, now I have drawn a line all the way down my dots, making this exactly 3-inch width all the way across. Now I did this on a straight edge of the foam already, not in the middle. That way I don't have to worry about one edge. And I already know that this edge on my right hand side is exactly straight as well, because that's how it is coming out of the package. Okay, so you'll notice that down here there's a little bit of odd shape here. This area is actually 3 inches, but right here is actually 3.5 inches. Now if I put my rod exactly against the shape that I've drawn, you'll see that that little notch actually fits your rod perfectly. Now the way it works is, like I said before, there's going to be 2-inch worth of padding so that your rod doesn't actually go through your sword. So this is why I left 2 inches. Now because I left that 2 inches, I'm going to need a little notch here so that the rod can exactly fit into place. So this is what it's going to look like when you have it, and this is what the rod is going to do inside your sword. So let's get a straight edge and let's cut this shape out. Alright, so I've cut out the piece that I just drew. It is exactly 32 inches long. That's the length of my entire blade. Okay, the next step is pretty simple. We're going to cut out a rectangular portion that is exactly the length of however long your blade happened to be. Like I said, in my case it was 32 inches. Now you want the width of it to be 7 inches. So again, how do we draw a straight line? Well, we measure 7 inches and we draw a bunch of dots all the way down so that it looks rectangular. So what we're going to do is we are going to draw a line that is straight down, connecting all the dots, and this way again, it's a straight line, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. And then after that, we'll cut this piece out. Okay, so I got these two pieces cut out, and now it's time to glue them together. Alright, so you notice that I actually drew an outline of this shape onto the bigger piece. This way I will know exactly where my boundaries are so that I don't waste my DAP. If you never used DAP before, this will be a good learning experience for you. Unlike regular glue, DAP requires you to glue both sides. So for example, if you were to glue this portion onto that portion, what you would need to do is apply a thin layer and a thin layer on this edge, and then you need to apply a thin layer on this edge. Once you put the glue on, you have to wait for about 15 minutes to 20 minutes until the glue actually dries, and then you can glue. When the glue is drying, it is very important that they get plenty of ventilation so that you do not make yourself sick. Okay, so let's get started. Alright, so what I am doing now is I am putting a thin layer. Try not to breathe in any of this stuff, it's pretty toxic. I'm putting a thin layer, or as thin as possible, on the first surface. I am keeping within the lines, so again, I do not waste my DAP. Okay, now that the DAP are applied, we're going to wait about 20 minutes for it to dry. Okay, let's try to put them together now. It's been about 15 to 20 minutes. And be very, very careful how you're gluing, because like I said, you don't have that much chances to fix it if you happen to mess up. Alright, so just glue the surface like so, flatten out, and there we go. The first portion of it is complete. Okay, now we're going to glue the next part together. When you make sure that the first part is completely dry, we're going to put DAP on both sides, and we're actually going to put DAP on your rod so it can fit right in there, just like that. Okay, so let's get to gluing. The rod as well. So remember how far up your rod actually is. So let's go ahead and put glue all the way around the rod. Okay, so I've just finished covering the rod with my DAP, and I am just going to go ahead and let it set. You should have plenty of surfaces with glue on them, so hopefully it will glue correctly. Now, go ahead and put the rod in its place, like so. That's where it's going to be sitting. Now just kind of use your glue to even it out a little bit. Now, again, like I said, if you cut a really nice straight ledge right here, it should touch pretty much with the rod the entire time. If it's a little bit off, it's okay, but just as long as you have enough of it being glued by the foam so it doesn't slip off in the middle of the fight, and we don't want that. So again, just use your brush, touch up whatever area that does not have enough glue on it, and yeah, we'll just let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll be right back. Okay, now we're actually going to be rolling this side onto that so it will glue together. This is probably the hardest part of this entire project. If you haven't gotten glue on your fingers yet, you're about to. and I would recommend to just put this under some heavy books to keep it flat overnight, and we'll resume tomorrow. Okay, now that your glue has dried, it is time to actually cut the blade out of your foam. What we want to do is we want to draw a blade about 2 inches wide like so, all the way down, and have a little curve in the end. How do we draw straight lines? Well, the same thing we've always done. Okay, we measure 2 inches from the edge, and we put a dot, and we go down a couple inches, and we draw a straight line. Now I've done that, and this is what my blade looks like. As you can see, it is 2 inches, like right here, from this point all the way down to here, and then it has a little curve. Now what we want to do is we want to take a razor blade, and we're going to cut out your actual sword. Now this part is very important that you have a very steady and very careful hand. We have to cut through 3 layers of this blue foam. Remember, if your cut is not straight, it will not look as good, and it might cost you your sword. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so again, just be patient and cut through the layers of the foam, and see how it looks. So there's a lot of little debris, that's fine. You could even take a sandpaper and just smooth out the edges, but well, it looks pretty good. So this is the blade that you're going to work with, and now we'll work on padding it. Alright, now let's work on padding your sword with a layer of this blue foam. It's very easy. Now this part, all we do is we take a strip of blue foam like this, we lay it on the ground, and we just kind of line it up from the edge of the blade to the end here, and we just kind of want to draw a line where the sword edge is, like so. We draw a line down, and we got to keep in mind the end will be a little bit curved. So, okay, now that we have this shape here, we just take a razor and we cut that out, and we'll glue this edge to your blade for some padding. Okay, so I've applied the glue on both sides. I applied the glue on the blade and on the padding here. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to glue it right on top, starting with the tip, and just work our way down. Remember, try to be as exact as you can. Now if you mismeasured and end up having a little bit sticking out at the end, no problems. So now we go on to the next step. Alright, now that we have one layer of blue foam on the sword for padding, we're going to get the open cell foam and do the same thing. So what we're going to do is, again like before, we're going to just put the sword against the foam, and we're going to draw a line all the way down. Keep in mind around the tip at the top. Now you'll notice that the easiest tool for cutting open cell foam is actually scissors. Okay, so I've actually already went ahead and cut out the pieces that I need, because the piece I got wasn't actually long enough for the sword. I needed 2, but that's fine. So again, what we gotta do is put DAP on both sides, and we are going to simply glue the edges like so. And once it's dried, you have your sword, and you are going to simply just let it dry and work on it some more tomorrow. And your sword is halfway done. Well, the glue has now dried, and hopefully your sword will look something like this. So the hardest part is now finished. Let's start working on the crossguard and the pommel. First thing we want to do is cut out 2 pieces of these rectangular shaped squares like so. This is 3 inches by 5 inches. What we're going to do is we're going to glue them together like so. Okay, and that's what the crossguard is going to be. Alright, now that you glue the two rectangular pieces together, you want to take a scissor and kind of just round off the corners so you have something that looks something like this. Notice that on the back I have this little cross section here. Basically that's just a way to for me to know where exactly the pole goes into. So where these crosses meet in the center, that's where I need to drill a hole. And the reason why I need to drill a hole is because that's where the rod is going to go through. And it's going to go through, and that's where the cross guard is how it's going to fit. So if you have a power tool, now would be a cool time to use it. If you don't, that's okay. You can always poke a hole some other way. I'll probably do it with a scissor. Once you punched a hole like so, all you gotta do is put some DAP on the surface and some DAP at the end of your sword, and you just slide your pole through the hole like so. And once it's glued, you're done with the crossguard. It's very simple. You might want to experiment a little bit with distances. Generally you want the same distance from here to here to here to here. But if it's not perfect, it's not that important. It's just a crossguard, but it looks good if you got it good right. After the crossguard is done, we will now want to do the pommel. Alright, so for the pommel portion, what we want to do is we want to take a strip of foam that is about 10 inches long. What we're going to do is essentially, it's very simple. We are going to glue, and we're going to wrap the foam around itself so that the pommel will become about 2.5 inches. That way it won't go into someone's eyeball. So now we just gotta glue it like so, and use tape to reinforce it. Now, because the way that works, we're gonna have to glue this portion one strip at a time. So at first we'll have to glue this part, and then we'll have to glue more and more and more as we move down. Okay, so first what I'm gonna do is I'm only going to put glue on this part of the foam, because once you start rolling, you'll have to actually glue on top of itself, and that would actually be really hard for you to glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do this in 4 or 5 different steps. Okay, now that your pommel is completed, it should be about 2.5 inches wide so that it does not go into an eye socket if accidents happen. Now what we want to do is we want to cap it off with 2 layers of foam. So it's very easy. All we got to do is get a foam outside like this, and we simply put the pommel against the foam, draw 2 circles like so, and cut them out. So now you have 2 pieces of circles like that. All you got to do is glue them on top of each other. It doesn't have to be perfect, this part. And you glue it on the back of your pommel. This way you have an extra 2 layers of foam to act as padding in case your rod does become loose. Alright, so there's many different ways to make a grip for your sword. The way that I'm going to show you is with a piece of foam like this, or if you have any spare blue foam, that's what you will use, and some rope. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to take the foam that you've just applied glue to, and you want to glue it onto the handle, and you just wrap it around. Okay, and then you want to get a few pieces of cloth tape ready. Simply wrap around it to make it a little more snug. Okay, now once we got the cloth tape on the handle, it's almost done. We just want to glue. You can use any glue you want. The rope, and you want to wrap it tight all the way around the handle. Again, there are many different ways for you to construct a grip. This is just one of the ways for you. Alright, as you can see, this part is a little bit time consuming. As you can see what I'm doing is I am putting glue on the rope bit by bit, a little bit at a time. Once I have some glue on my rope, I am putting some glue on the handle. I'm only doing this about 2-3 inches at a time, so it takes a lot of patience. But this part is very easy. Once the glue is dried, all I gotta do is wrap the rope around the handle until I got it all the way down to the end. Alright, this is the last part of the grip. I am putting on the rope. Notice how I'm actually turning the weapon. And then you just cut off the excess. That's it. So once you got the rope onto your grip, you want to take some cloth tape and simply reinforce your rope. I've already done one layer of it. You can go ahead and apply a second layer of it. This will ensure your grip stays strong and comfortable. Well, there you have it. Once our grip is done, our sword is almost completed. All we have to do now is create a cloth cover for the striking surface. Now, if you do not know how to sew or do not want to worry about sewing, there's other things you can do. You can take a roll of cloth tape like what we've been using and simply put tape along the striking edge. That will count as cloth covering. If you're from a realm that does not require you to have a cloth covering and you painted your entire weapon with latex, then you're basically done. Another thing you can do is you can take strips of cloth like this and duct tape them to your edge of the sword, and that will count as cloth covering as well. Now, in the next step of the tutorial, we're going to show you how to simply sew a cloth covering. It's actually pretty easy. Of any kind of cloth that you want, and I have my sword laid on top of it. And what we're essentially going to be doing is we will be folding part of the cloth on top of each other, and we're just going to sew along the shape of your blade. After you've done that, you're going to turn your cloth cover inside out and tape it to the sword itself. And that's how we create a sword cover. So on to the actual process. Alright, so the first step that we have to do is we need to pin the cloth together along the edge of the sword. What this does is it will create the shape that you want, and it will let you know exactly where you need to sew. So what we're going to do is we are just going to put pins all the way up along your sword, creating the desired shape that you want. Okay, so the last part will be the hardest to pin because this is where your blade actually curves. So try to pin it as close as you can, hugging the curve of your sword. Okay, now it looks like we have our general shape of the sword completely pinned. So now you can actually pull the sword out of your cloth cover, like so. And now you have your cloth cover. Now you just gotta actually sew it together. Alright, so now that we have our cloth entirely pinned, we want to cut away the excess of a cloth at about finger width. This will give you plenty of space to sew still, and it will cut away all the cloth that you do not need, so you can save it for the next one. While you're sewing, you want to be careful to actually sew on the outside of your pin. Depending on how close you pin your pins to your sword, if you sew too close to the pin, you actually won't be able to fit your sword through the sword cover. So just be aware of where you're actually putting your stitches at and where your pins are. So this will ensure that your sword cover actually fit your sword. And we just got to sew the entire length of your sword cover. Okay, so once you finish sewing, hopefully your sword cover will look something like it should. And all we have to do now is turn the sword cover inside out so your stitches are hidden from view. At the same time, you'll have a beautiful sword cover on the other side. Now I've put some double-sided tape on my weapon. You can buy double-sided tape from Walmart. Those are actually carpet tape. So what we're going to do now is we simply slip that sword cover over the sword, and it will be taped by this double-sided tape. And once we do that, we are going to get the cloth tape like what we've been using, and we're going to actually wrap the bottom where the sword and the cloth meets. That way it will be secure. Alright, so for the last step, once we have our sword cover in place, we want to take our cloth tape and do a couple loops of it on your blade. And this will ensure your cloth cover stays still. Okay, and your sword is now complete. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, and hopefully you learned something. You can use this technique on several different types of weapons as well, the axe included. So go out and have fun and enjoy your brand new sword.